So much of the way that a salesperson operates and finds advantages is based on going to 40,000 feet all the time and surveying the lay of the land. What's happening? How are things getting done? What's happening? Understanding what business you're really in.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why? Hi everyone, I'm Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Bob Knakal. Bob's been a broker in New York City since 1984, and over that time he's brokered the sale of over 2,329 buildings, having a market value of approximately $22 billion, which are crazy big numbers, and I'm very excited to hear the story behind all of this, Bob. First though, thank you for coming on the show. I'm very excited to get to talk to you today.
Yeah, Jason, great to be with you today, and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, same here. Why don't you start with your story? Tell us. It's a lot of extended success over time. So maybe give us a little bit about how you got started and kind of what transpired. You've been through some market cycles. I am, like I said, very interested to hear this.
Sure. Well, I got into real estate completely by accident, believe it or not. And I feel so fortunate that happened because real estate for me is a job and it's a hobby. I love doing it. I love selling buildings. I've been a broker for 40 years in Manhattan, as you said, starting in 1984. I'll take you back to 1981. I'm a freshman at the Wharton School. Want to be the next Gordon Gekko, like every other Wharton kid, and take over Wall Street. So I figured a summer job in investment banking or commercial banking would look good on my resume. I grew up in northern New Jersey and drove around during spring break, dropping my resume off at investment banks and commercial banks. I was in Hackensack, New Jersey, came out of a Payne Weber office, and across the hall I saw Coldwell Banker. I walked into the place thinking it was a bank, gave them my resume. They called me later that day to set up an interview for the following day. Set up the interview, go to the library to look up this bank, see it's a real estate company, almost don't go on the interview, but they were the only ones hiring college kids for the summer. Took the job, loved it, went back my next 2 summers, and then started with CB in New York when I got out of school. So very serendipitous start to my entry into real estate. And, back in those days in the 80s, real estate wasn't nearly as mainstream an asset class as it is today. So commercial real estate was normally a second, third, or fourth career for folks. But I got into it very, very early and, have loved it since my first day on the job. Still love it as much today as I did then. As I said, I've been doing it for 40 years. Was at CB for 4 years, met my business partner, Paul Massey, there. We left in November of 88, started our own firm, which we grew from just the 2 of us to 250 people in 3 offices. Sold that building. We sold that business. We actually ran the business for 26 years and 46 days, and then sold it to Cushman & Wakefield for $100 million in December of 2014. It was 3.5 years at Cushman. As the chairman of New York Investment Sales, joined JLL in September of 2018 as the chairman of New York Investment Sales, and recently departed from JLL, started my own firm again, BKREA, and doing the same thing I've done for 40 years, selling buildings in New York and loving it still.
Good. Well, I'm glad you still enjoy it. It's a lot of longevity. It just shows your passion for it. It's funny because a lot of people that I've had on the podcast get into real estate accidentally. That's not unusual, but usually that means they had a place that they owned that they had to move and oh, by the way, I guess I'll rent this out or I can't sell it or something like that. But you came in accidentally. I mean, that's really accidentally, just not maybe knowing what Coldwell Banker was doing. So You did so that this is commercial real estate, right? This was not residential, and you said wasn't mainstream back then. I mean, what did it look like for you when you were getting started? I mean, kind of how did you cut your teeth in the business? I would imagine a lot of the strategies still apply to brokers, kind of wanting to get into commercial real estate today, but maybe with just a little more technology. I guess you
Sure,
wouldn't have to
sure. I
bring your
mean,
resume door to door.
yeah, well, it was very different back in the old days. When I started in the business in '84, and when we started Massey Knakal in '88, the quality and volume of publicly available information was not very good at all. So we implemented a territory system, which is essentially like a residential farming approach where a residential broker will work one neighborhood and go door to door, ringing doorbells, meeting people. We did the same thing in the commercial space. We went around each block in Manhattan in the selected geographic territory we were in, calling every property owner, asking them about their property, what they were looking to buy, if they were interested in selling. Got to know the neighborhoods really well, and the geographic orientation worked really well and allowed us to differentiate ourselves from the competition. That differentiation led to a specialization, and that specialization created a competitive advantage. So we were able to parlay that into a business that was growing very, very quickly. Hired people to work in adjacent territories to us, and grew like a jigsaw puzzle until we had all of Manhattan filled in. Then we went out to Queens and opened an office there, opened an office in Brooklyn, hired a lot of agents, and just utilized that system really well. Today, I would say, based on the volume and accuracy of publicly available data, that system would not work as well today as it did back then. Today, I think product specialization is more important. But the three things that I've seen in people in the real estate business that have gotten to the top of the industry, the three main factors. One is they become an expert in a market niche. The niche is small enough that they can know everything about it, but big enough that you can make a great living doing it. But they really, really know their market better than anyone. Two is passion. You have to love it. The market has been, is, and always will be cyclical. No matter how good you are, you're going to have tough times. And it's the passion that allows you to get through those tough times, to live to see the brighter days. And then thirdly is discipline. A lot of what we do in the brokerage business is not very glamorous, but you have to do the fundamental basic blocking and tackling, we call it, kind of things, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and then you start to see the results. So those are the three things that I think folks who really have achieved great success in real estate, and probably in most businesses, are expertise, passion, and discipline.
That makes so much sense. I've talked to some other brokers, interestingly, in New York City, mostly on the residential side, and they talked very much about that same market specific, like just getting really, really dialed in on your location and knowing every building and every owner and all of that within that space. And interesting to hear you say that you think that may not be as effective anymore because of the amount of data that's available, but that now you're looking at being more product specific. That shift over time, was that just completely data driven for you? Is that really related to just, now we can find so much more on the internet, on our phone. There's just, you've got to.
Jason, so much of the way that a salesperson operates and finds advantages is based on going to 40,000 feet all the time and surveying the lay of the land. What's happening? How are things getting done? What's happening? Understanding what business you're really in. We knew right from the start we were not in the real estate business. The real estate brokerage business is the information and the relationship business. You have to have great information, and you have to work on developing and building and maintaining strong relationships with people. So understanding that really was a very, very important thing. The other thing that we acknowledged and had to be very cognizant of is that as a broker, your two main assets are your knowledge and your time. And you're trying to increase your knowledge base every single day, but it's hard to make more time. So you have to use time as effectively as possible. And the product specialization allows you to leverage time better because let's say last week, if I was a generalist and I sold a retail property, an office building, and an apartment building, and this week I'm trying to get hired to sell an apartment building. Well, the owner I'm meeting with this week wants to hear everything about the apartment building I sold last week. Couldn't care less about the retail property or the office building I sold. So 2/3 of my time last week is not accretive towards me getting this week's assignment. If I had sold 3 apartment buildings last week and I'm pitching an apartment building this week, then 100% of the time I spent working last week is helping me get this week's assignment. So that's how you can leverage your time a little better, use your time more effectively. And that's why today I think product specialization is much more important than a geographic specialization.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I probably, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot about the New York City real estate market that's very, very specific to that area. And I don't live there, but I live in Los Angeles. We have probably similar challenges in the real estate space with some of the legislation and things like that. But at the end of the day, people are successful in real estate. I mean, out here, maybe you hear this in New York too, but out here, people are all the time like, oh, don't invest here in California. You can invest, remotely in other states and other places that are more landlord friendly. But I think a lot of it just comes down to what your knowledge, as you spoke, as you stated, your sort of knowledge and expertise of whether it's market specialization or product specialization. And I think that kind of goes for anything. Like you can make money as an investor here in Los Angeles, you can in New York. There's been a lot of talk about some changes to the legislation in New York City relatively recently. How does that affect commercial real estate? I guess apartment buildings fall under that category. Maybe talk to what some of the changes have been recently and how that's impacted you and I guess how you've pivoted if you've had to.
Sure. No, it's, the unfortunate reality is that particularly our housing market in New York is more highly correlated to public policy than to the actual demand and supply drivers within the market itself. And so it's been really unfortunate that the hypocrisy coming out of our policymakers has been unbelievable. Every single one says, we want New York to be more affordable for everybody. But if that's the case, then why has every single piece of legislation that's been implemented since 2018 or ignored since 2018, it's done nothing but constricted supply and exerted upward pressure on prices, making it less affordable for everybody. And if you look at simply at the pandemic, when a lot of people moved out of Manhattan, people weren't going into the office, people didn't renew their leases, moved out of Manhattan, vacancy rose significantly. That vacancy rising is similar to supply increasing. And the supply increase, which is really the solution to all of New York's housing problem, exerted downward pressure on rents very significantly. In fact, rents in Manhattan in 2020 dropped by 30%. There has not been a housing policy implemented by any municipality anywhere in the United States that has caused rents to drop by 30%. So all we need is more supply and we solve all of our problems, but yet getting new programs to incentivize the creation of new supply is very, very challenging to get. And so our housing market is very, very challenged today. So, there was a huge shift in our rent regulation laws in June of 2019 that really has created significant downward pressure on value. They also have disincentivized the private sector to invest in the housing stock. So the quality of the housing stock is diminishing day by day. Quality of life for the tenants is diminishing day by day, all because of our politicians. You look at I'm lifelong diehard Yankee fan. 1978 Yankees Dodgers World Series. Reggie Jackson's hitting all the home runs. The Goodyear blimp is over Yankee Stadium. Pans out, 6 fires going on within 3 blocks of Yankee Stadium. Those fires were going on because it made more sense for people to burn their building down than to invest in it. And so the city very wisely came up with 2 incentive programs to incentivize the private sector to invest in the housing stock. The Major Capital Improvement Program to do building-wide improvements, and the Individual Apartment Improvement Program to upgrade the conditions within each unit. And in 1978, the dilapidation rate in New York City was 14%, meaning that 14% of the housing units were deemed uninhabitable because of their condition. These 2 programs went into effect. They incentivized the private sector to invest tens of billions of dollars into the housing stock. In 2019, the dilapidation rate in New York was 0.04%. And our policymakers marginalized both of those programs to the point where there's no incentive to invest in the housing stock today. And recently in the new New York State budget, they enhanced the programs a little bit, but not nearly enough to make a dent in what is really problematic, because most of those previously rent stabilized units that have become vacant have just been nailed shut, and they're not being rented to anybody. That's further constricting supply and exerting upward pressure on rents, making the city less affordable for everybody. So, it's unfortunate that our policymakers have kind of common sense repellent all over them, and are unable to think of the very simple, basic things that would make the city more affordable for everyone. And we desperately need housing at all strata of income levels. And we just don't have the policy to create it, and it's a shame.
Yeah, I don't claim to be to know how to be a politician or policymaker. I'm not, a great economist, but I do see a lot of this stuff just doesn't make common sense. It just does. Like, they talk about affordability, but the affordability can't only apply to the tenants or residents, right? The people that own these buildings. There's got to be some level of consideration of affordability there. When all of expenses are going up, there's got to be some way to manage that. And I think, I don't know if the thought is that everybody who owns an apartment building is some billionaire and can handle it, but that is not the reality. The reality is a lot of the apartment buildings are purchased by regular people via syndication, joint ventures, on their own, that sort of thing, and they're just trying to make better lives for themselves. So it's I agree. It just doesn't make sense. I don't claim to know exactly what the answer is. I'm sure more supply would certainly help, but it is a fascinating thing to sort of see these decisions that get made. It's not just New York City. Like, it's in really all of the major metros. So I very much appreciate your take on that. What do you do as a broker? Obviously this is going to create some challenges in the market. As a broker, what are you doing to combat this? Help, I guess you're trying to help people on both sides, right? Find housing solutions and find investable product for your buyers. How do you kind of balance it in the face of these things?
Well, I just represent sellers, Jason. You mentioned that, I've sold 2,332 buildings in New York. Every time I've represented the seller exclusively. Okay. So I'm just trying to get the maximum price for the building. That's become more and more challenging in the face of all these political headwinds. But you just have to adapt to a changing environment. You have to understand what the laws are, what people can and can't do, and try to advise them as well as you possibly can relative to when they should make moves or when they shouldn't make moves, and just try to give the clients the best advice you possibly can regarding what their options are and what they could potentially do. And with the downward pressure that's been exerted on property values today, the people who are selling are people who either have no choice, the old reliable death, divorce, taxes, partnership disputes, things like that, or very compelling strategic reasons that are forcing people to sell or incentivizing them to sell. So, a number of things that that people are looking at, but we just try to give our clients as much information as possible to make the most informed decisions possible about what to do. But no doubt it is very, very challenging today.
When you talk about the need for supply and how that would help affordability, is there space for that? How do you see that fitting into New York City? Again, that's one of the issues that we have here in LA is a space issue. So how do you see that kind of playing out if there was incentivization to have it happen?
Yeah, well, the reality is, we don't have rolling pastures of land for people to build on, but we do have a lot of buildings that were built pre-1900 that are little 3 and 4 story buildings that are long past their useful life and need to be demolished to make way for new buildings. And even today, our Class B and C office buildings are trading now at prices that even when you layer demolition costs on, they're trading below land value. So a lot of the office buildings that are being sold today are really land deals. So there's plenty of space on which to build new buildings to create more supply so that things are more affordable for people. We need that new supply desperately. And the office sector is one of the places we can get it. We have 100 million square feet of vacant office space in New York City. There are only 6 cities in the whole country that have 100 million feet of office space. So, we have a lot of office space that's empty. A lot of that should be converted to residential uses, but the economics are very, very difficult. So we need some help with tax abatements and other incentives to make it economically viable.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up, because I think I've been, it's sort of on the surface, you look at it and you say, okay, we have all this office, the values of office is going down tremendously. There's vacant office buildings everywhere. So people are, unfortunately, people in the office sector are struggling. But, I think surface logic would be like, well, let's convert that all into housing. But the reality, because I've looked into it, is it's not, the way that office is constructed is not really conducive to turning it into residential. The cost, and my understanding is you'd almost be better off tearing it down and just starting anew in those instances. And so it's unfortunate that that's the case, but it is. I mean, that it's just a simple economics equation where it costs you more to try and convert that existing office into apartment buildings. So I guess really we're looking at, sort of demolition of unused space to create space for new housing to fill that supply. I mean, that's ultimately, in the high density areas like New York and LA, that's probably realistically our only option, or you just have to move out of the city. People have to live from the city, but that's not, not everybody wants to do that. That's not a number one option for most people that are
yeah,
in
New York. New York is very lucky. A lot of people want to come live here and work here. We just have to make their housing affordable for them, and we can do it. It just takes the right policy. I've always said to every politician I've met, the private sector has a tremendous amount of dexterity. They will do anything you want them to do with the proper incentives. So it's just a matter of coming up with the right incentives, and you can have anything done that you want.
Yeah, no, it's very true. There's plenty of people looking for these opportunities. I know that, and people just kind of looking, well, can I make this work somehow? So it's just a matter of kind of the builders, investors, whoever you want to refer to it, that those people working kind of hand in hand with the policymakers to create a solution, and then really achievable if everybody will put their heads together, which is maybe the hardest part of making anything happen. Bob, let me switch gears. I want to get to ask you the questions I ask every guest, and the first one is always based on the name of the show being Know Your Why. I like to ask people, what is your why? And you've had a lot of success, sort of extended success, and I think one of the things I've always been fascinated by is kind of the evolution of people's why. I've found that to be true in myself even before I knew that was a thing that could happen. I just started noticing. But I would imagine throughout your career, maybe you've had some shift in what your why is. But I wondered if you would just speak to that for a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think I've always been a very competitive person. Always played sports as a kid. And I think that's where I got my competitive spirit. And real estate is a great field if you're competitive, because there are lots of opportunities to win. As a broker, you kind of feel a sense of winning when you find out a client wants to sell their building. And then there's a sense of winning when the client says they're going to hire you to sell it for them. And then there's another win when you sign the contract, and another win when you close the deal. And I think that winning is very addictive. And so I think that's part of it. Early on, it was, I saw it as a field that I loved, but that you could also make a lot of money. And so that was something that was very attractive about the business. After we sold Massey Knakal, I was very introspective for a while, thinking, okay, what do I want to do now? Do I want to go buy property? Do I want to go sit on 7 Mile Beach in Grand Cayman for the rest of my life? Do I, want to do something else? And what occurred to me is that I truly love being a broker, and just wanted to continue to sell buildings. And then, many years ago, someone brought to my attention that, hey, Bob, I think you've sold more buildings in New York than anybody else in history. And it didn't occur to me, but back in the 70s and before the 70s, most real estate brokers were not highly specialized. They would do a sale, they'd do leases, they'd get a mortgage for you, they'd manage property, they did all kinds of things. So this age of specialization really started in the 80s and 90s. And I started in 84, and then that kind of became a cool thing. Hey, maybe I've sold more buildings than anybody else ever in New York. And that's been building. So that's kind of a neat thing. Being a big baseball fan again, 3,000 hits is a great milestone in Major League Baseball. So, I'd love to get to 3,000 buildings sold. And so I think the why is a combination of feeding the competitive spirit of wanting to continue this legacy of a nice track record that's been developed. And I think part of it also, interestingly, is probably self-doubt. I think that no matter how good you are, at least for me, you're only as good as your last deal. So I try not to rest on my laurels, try not to get lulled into a sense of comfort. But I think every day I'm just trying to prove to myself that I can still do it. It's kind of like I got into the Wharton School because of baseball, because I played baseball. My grades were not good enough to get me in. I really think it helped me get in. And I remember my first Econ 101 exam I had. I was so nervous about it. And that was the first exam I got back, and I had gotten a B. And I feel so great because I'm like, hey, I can cut it here in this big Ivy League. And in the same way, it's like every day I'm thinking, all right, I got to go out and prove that I can do it and sell a building. So I think it the job satisfies all of those things. Satisfies the competitive nature, satisfied the addiction to winning, satisfied the ability to overcome self-doubt. And for a number of reasons, I just think it's the coolest thing. And I often tell people I'm 62 years old. I'm never going to retire. When they put me in the ground, my wife will have to go collect some commissions. But it's a great profession. I feel so blessed that I stumbled into it, and just having a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's funny how, I guess, the competitive drive, or what you listed self-doubt there, and it's just it's an interesting thing that just made me think about, like, a lot of times you'll see on social media and things like that where it's, people are like, oh, I get driven by the haters or something like that. But I think that if you really look at the, like, people that have achieved big things, like yourself, you could put like Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant, Tom Brady, like all these professional athletes that have had such extended success. They were able to, I guess, use their own self-doubt to fuel them. I don't know that they necessarily called it that, but I feel like, it's like at some point you have so much success that nobody's doubting you anymore, right? It was, Tom Brady had, I'm from New England, so I'm a big Tom Brady fan, but Tom Brady has, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 Super Bowls. It's like at some point the debate on who is the greatest quarterback of all time just went away. Like, as a fan, I was arguing he was early on, but then it was just like, no, he just kept going. Like, he kept going past the other greats, and to be able to continue to be so driven, I think that comes from within, with exactly like you're talking about. It's just, you just want to keep proving to yourself that you can do it, that you can continue to maintain that level of success. And so I'm just always fascinated by the psychology of success, and also a big sports fan. And so it's just seeing that sort of thing. You mentioned baseball. It's funny because, the greatest baseball players of all time, they get a hit a third of the time, right? That like a third of the time is the best you can possibly be as a hitter. And it's just like, there's something very fascinating about that, where it's like, how do you continue to work that hard, to be that good, to get a hit a third of the time? And it's just stuff like that there's something really fascinating behind it. So I just, the fact that you said that, it just makes me think of kind of all of those ideas I've had, especially sports related, but I think it can carry into business and careers and whatever you want it to be, right? Whatever you want
That's
to
why
use.
I think, again, understanding what business you're in, understanding what the probability of success is. If you know that a great hitter hits 330 or 340, you're expecting to make outs 2/3 of the time.
Yeah.
So if you get up, you're starting a game, your first 2 at bats, you don't get a hit, you can't feel that bad, because if your lifetime average is 333, the chances are pretty good you're going to get a hit the next time. In building sales, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
In Manhattan, south of 96th Street, which is the prime part of Manhattan where I do most of my work, there's 27,649 buildings. And the average turnover rate of that stock over the last 40 years is 2.6%. So what that means is that when someone buys a property in Manhattan, they own it for on average 40 years. So if only 2.6% of the stock is trading in the average year, and if you assume, excuse me, half the stuff that goes on the market will actually trade, you only have 5% of the stuff that exists that's on the market at any one time that tells you if you're calling 20 owners in a day, there's only one that's going to say, yeah, I want to sell my building. So knowing that will allow you to realize that if you make 19 calls and get hung up on 19 times in a row, you should be feeling pretty good because the probability is very high the next call is going to be a good one.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's really an amazing reframe, and it is hard to shift. It is hard to shift that focus, and carrying that baseball analogy even further is like most of the guys that hit, in the 330, 340, they aren't usually the big home run hitters. They're just consistent, right? They're just, they're there's some outliers, Babe Ruth, but the idea is like generally you hit for average, you hit home runs, and so you can look at that and say, well, what's my strategy, right? Am I trying to get less of these but have the very, very best ones, or am I just trying to do kind of steady, having success a third of the time and just keep going? I think it's such a compelling perspective on success. So thank you for humoring that little sports discussion. I appreciate it. Sure. When people hear this and they want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
Best way is to email me. My email address is bk@bkrea.com. Or you can follow me on social media and just DM me. I'm on I think with just about all the major social media platforms, and always happy to hear from folks and help them out if I'm able to help them achieve success in their careers.
Yeah, and we'll have all of that in the show notes for folks listening as well. My final question for you, Bob: what piece of advice would you give to someone who, and you can take this in whatever direction you want, but someone wants to get started. They hear this, they see your passion about being a broker. If you want to speak to getting started as a broker, I think that's very appropriate. If you want to take it another direction, please be my guest.
Yeah, Jason, I think just generally what I tell young people, and I talk to a lot of young folks that are in college and mentor some folks, tell them, expose yourself to as many things as you possibly can, but try to find what you're very passionate about, what you love. Because if you pick a job because you think you'll make a lot of money, but you don't really love the job, you're going to burn out. You're not going to be able to work as hard as you need to work to achieve success. And if you want to get to the top of anything, you have to put the time in. We always used to joke around at NYC and say, to be successful, you only have to work half a day. Doesn't matter what 12 hours you work, but you got to work 12 hours a day. And it's hard to work that much if you don't really love it. So, folks say, yeah, I really like real estate. I want to get into the business. I'm like, well, you just open yourself up to 100 possible jobs. Do you want to invest in real estate? Do you want to analyze real estate? Do you want to work at a big real estate investment trust? Do you want to work for a developer? Do you want to build buildings? Do you want to be a broker? And even if you say you want to be a broker, there are 10 different types of brokers you can be. Do you want to rent apartments? Do you want to sell apartments? Do you want to lease stores? Do you want to rent office space? Do you want to broker mortgages or raise equity for people or sell buildings? If you want to sell buildings, what kind of buildings do you want to sell? What type of deals do you want to do? Where do you want to do it? I mean, there's a million different things, I think, to kind of look at the lay of the land and figure out what it is that you really, really enjoy, such that you can't wait to get up in the morning. It's 6, 7 o'clock at night and you're sitting at your desk and say, where the heck did the day go? I wish I had 5 more hours to get more stuff done. Then you're really putting yourself in a position to have a very, very happy life. And along those lines, I would say also to have a perspective on life that it's one of abundance. I think there are 2 different philosophies I see with people. One is that everything's a zero-sum game, and a win for you is a loss for me, so I don't want you to win. The other philosophy is, hey, there's enough to go around for everybody. And if you win, good for you. And I'm going to get my win, and then good for me. And I think the folks who have the abundance mentality are generally a lot happier than the zero-sum game folks, because no matter what, you can't win all the time. So, I think those are the two big takeaways. Number one, find what you're passionate about. And in business, if you have the passion, you'll work hard enough to succeed. And if you have the drive and the passion and you work hard enough, you'll get to the top of an industry. And if you get to the top of any industry in business, you're going to make a lot of money. So the money is just a byproduct of passion and working hard. And then just have the abundance mentality. Help the people around you. Help your competitors. Don't do it for your own detraction from what you're doing. But if you can help someone. There's enough to go around for everybody, and I think you'll have a happier life if you're able to do that.
Yeah. No. Yeah. Certainly that. I mean, yes, I agree with everything. I think certainly the point about you will be happier, not sort of living that zero-sum game and scrapping for every win at the expense of other people. It's just not, you're never going to be kind of satisfied with that. Well, Bob, this was great. Thank you so much for coming on the show, sharing your story. I think this will be really inspirational to the listeners. So thank you so much for taking the time up today.
You got it, Jason. It was great being with you, and I hope folks get something out of this.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure they will. Folks listening, I know you're going to love this. Please make sure you connect with Bob, and please like, rate, and review the show so we can get more great guests. And thank you all for listening. Hey there. I am Dr. Jason Ballara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?